Welcome to the Techspace pod, where we cut through the noise to spotlight the European founders, operators, and investors who are building the future, and the teams that are shaping tech in Berlin, London, and beyond. Each episode brings sharp insight from our members and wider network, covering everything from frontier tech and funding to team culture and scaling strategy. Hello, I'm Jane Wakefield, a former BBC technology journalist and your host for today's podcast. And I'm pleased to say I'm joined by Vincent Audoire, the co-founder and chief technology officer of Feather, a digital insurance platform. Welcome, Vincent.
Thank you for having me.
You're very, very, very welcome. Let's start by you telling me a little bit about Feather.
Sure. So Feather, we are a B2, so we are a B2C, so direct to consumer insurance company. We're based in Berlin and we are targeting mostly expats, so people who are moving from one country to another one. And our core market is Germany right now. And yeah, we're sort of like helping people with everything insurance related. So either health insurance or home insurance or anything around that. And we are sort of like giving a lot of advice to people about what insurance you need to get, and just making simple insurance pretty much.
What led you to, first of all, come on insurance as a company that you wanted to work in, and secondly, this expat market specifically?
Sure. So it's probably coming back from my previous work experience. So before founding Feather, I was one of the early employees at N26, which was a neobank, which is still a neobank actually. You probably haven't heard about it, but anyway, I joined banking, and banking, I saw a lot of parallel between banking and insurance, meaning that banking is frankly quite a boring industry in general, and it was super outdated at this time. Right now we have all of those neobanks such as N26 or Revolut, but back then when I joined them, which was more than 10 years ago, but back then it was really nascent. And I saw the parallel with the banking industry 10 years ago and the insurance industry right now, because the insurance industry is kind of like lagging behind the banking industry in this term. And I found it super interesting to work on those boring industries because there's just so much things to do there. Like, insurance has such a bad reputation, such a bad name, and the user experience around insurance is just terrible. So there's a lot of like room for improvement, which I found really exciting. But yeah, it's kind of like it's how to say, it's a bit of a boring industry in general when yeah.
It's a really old industry as well, isn't it? I mean,
Yes.
like banking, it goes back many, many
Yes,
centuries, and
absolutely.
a lot of people would say, that it's still does a lot of things in the way that were done many, many centuries ago.
Yeah, absolutely. That's we are painfully aware about it. Sometimes we are speaking with some potential partners, and yes, it is pretty it is pretty set in the past.
Another thing it shares with banking is it's heavily regulated.
Yes.
How has that been dealing with an industry that comes with so much regulation?
Mm-hmm. So that's also an interesting parallel that we did with the my sort of like my experience at N26, is that of course it's an industry which is heavily regulated, but we are what we call an MGA. So we're not directly dealing with the insurance provider itself. So sorry, we're not really dealing with the insurance legal itself. We're sort of like regulated, but as a broker. So we're kind of like acting as a broker on steroid, let's say. And we're dealing everything which is customer related, which allow us to sort of like, the way you can see it, I'm explaining this one a bit poorly, but like the way you can see it is that we're doing all of the heavy lifting customer facing interaction because this is what we're good at, and all of the sort of like legalese, we are leaving this one to a partner. So this allow us to sort of like being able to like iterate ultra fast and do the thing that matter for our customers. We're leaving all of the complicated legal environments to our risk carrier pretty much.
Another thing that you've brought from your previous role is an engineering background.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Obviously, we've seen lots of people that are engineers found companies. What is it that you bring specifically to a company when you're coming from that background? Is it that you understand the product and what you need to do, or is there something else?
Uh, for me, I think the engineering background is really playing a lot in terms of like how to solve problems. So sort of like seeing them like solving each and every problem with sort of like an engineering mindset, sort of like, okay, we have this big problem in front of us. How do we make it like, how do we split it into smaller individual chunks? And then are these chunks small enough that they can be like singly addressed? Where is sort of like the hot points in those things, in those small little problems, and how do we like sequentially go about and solving them? And that's where I think the engineering sort of like plays a key role in building businesses. So it's sort of like the approach to problem solving.
Would you say that you have a fairly sort of rebellious attitude to founding a company? Another thing that you did was bootstrap for an awful long time
Okay.
before you raised money. Is that something that you decided you needed to do, or was it something that just happened because you just couldn't raise any money?
Yeah. So the non-glorious answer is actually number two. So we did try. So like the full story is that so we went through this accelerator program, which is named Entrepreneur First, which is based in the UK, and they were launching their Berlin batch. And the goal, sort of like the typical way companies go through EF, is that they go through Entrepreneur First. They like they get validated and they're doing demo days, so sort of like they're going through the selection process. Then they pitch their idea in front of like a whole lot of investors, and then they get to raise their seed funding. For us, it didn't. We're not able to get traction from raising seed funding from this batch of investors. So it left us with only one choice, which is like, well, I mean, the company is gonna die, or we need to make money, and that's kind of like where we realized that we might be able to bootstrap it. But originally, like when you see all of your friends raising crazy amount of money or raising money and you not at all, you're kind of like feeling frankly quite envious. So like this was not something we wanted to do at the beginning. And then we bootstrapped because, sort of like the context made us having to bootstrap pretty much. And and it's pretty fun to bootstrap in the end. It's kind of like you're always looking at, it's funny because my friend who raised money, they were like, oh, I wish we could have done a bootstrap. And when you're bootstrapping, you're like, oh, I wish I could have raised money. So you're never really.
What was fun about it?
What was fun about bootstrapping
Bootstrapping, yeah.
is because you really have a lot of freedom, and you don't have the sort of like when you're raising money from VCs. Um, I mean, there is a expected return on the money that you're raising, so it's a lot of pressure, it's a lot of stress. When you're bootstrapping, you have a bit more freedom around that. You need to be way more connected to your money as well. I mean, this is not the fun part, of course, but it's a sort of like it's a different mentality, and I think for us it really worked well at the beginning for us, and it's fun because you have a bit more control over your company.
And I guess it instills a certain degree of discipline as well.
Absolutely, yes, yes.
Was the lack of funding down to the fact that people didn't believe in insurance and wanting to back insurance? What was it that sort of was putting VCs off, do you think?
Um, I think it's a bit hard to answer on this one. Yeah, I guess it's down to like how convincing you are with your numbers and things like that. I think also there is a difference of mentality between because we went through this batch of Entrepreneur First, which is UK based, and most of their portfolio was from the UK. So most of the VC that they presented to us were UK based VC, which we didn't really understood the German market when it's come to insurance, which is fair. Um, and also the German VC have a different mindset than the UK VC, for instance. The UK will be a bit more uh, like American style in some way, meaning that they will bake you on the team, on your ID, like on the vision kind of things, where the German VCs were a bit more, well, show me your numbers kind of things. So it was at the beginning we had just frankly no numbers because we were just like two guys with a sort of like an ID, but nothing more than that. So yeah, that's why it was sort of like difficult for us to raise funding. And yeah.
It begs the question then, you're French.
Mm.
Why did you choose Berlin?
I went, I moved to Berlin like a while ago, 10 years ago. And not to start this company, I just, I lived all my life in Paris and I wanted to see something different. And when I moved to Berlin, like Berlin was really booming in terms of tech. Yeah, and there was a lot of company popping here and there. There was like the hot city after London in Europe when it comes to startups. I really wanted to work for SoundCloud at this time, but yeah, and yeah, and then I happened to like find some different jobs, stayed at N20, joined N26 when it was super early, and just yeah, kind of like made my way in Berlin in this way.
So you're headquartered in Berlin, but now, thankfully, you've moved on from the bootstrapping era into an era when you can actually expand. So tell me a little bit about that expansion and how you manage being headquartered in one particular city when you're also trying to expand to many other different countries.
Sure. So yes, we are headquartered in Berlin, but we're like a remote, we're a remote first company. So we have employees in a lot of different countries, Spain, Portugal, yeah, Cyprus, France, etc. So it felt quite natural for us to sort of like do the expansion. Like there is no, it's not like we need to open a branch in this country or something like that. So it was kind of like we didn't really have to think about like in terms of administration costs behind it. Like there's not that much that we needed to do to go on this expansion.
So you say that you're a remote first company, which begs the question, what is the purpose of an office? What do you see as the role of the office in what you're doing?
Sure. Actually, yes, we're a remote first company with an office in Berlin, which sounds a bit how to say, not very logical. But for the few people that actually do like to see human face-to-face interaction, like for me, I know that I like to go to the office because it gives me this sort of like, I go to the office and then when I'm done with my day, I travel back home. There is this sort of like,
Demarcation.
yes, thank you, which I'm kind of like lacking at home. So that's why we like to like some people likes to go to the office, and there was a demand for having an office. It happens to be in Berlin because that's where we have the most people here. But I think if, say, for instance, we had 20 plus people in Madrid and they really wanted to have an office there to, meet, we'll probably be opening also an office there. And I hope Techspace has a space there. But yeah, that's kind of like why there is a need for having this office pretty much.
And what's next? Are you eyeing up other countries? Are you looking to move out beyond Europe?
Yeah, so absolutely. So right now we are in Germany. That's our stronghold, I would say. Then we have France and Spain when we have like actual like presence with country managers. We are also technically live in Euro wide with some policies, and we're actively looking at countries outside of Europe as well. So we are currently thinking about Mexico, LATAM, Latin America in general, and also UAE as well. So like we have some ideas around that, around expansion. Hopefully it's going to materialize this year, but let's see. Yeah, we're kind of like looking at the market in different places.
And how do you navigate that in terms of, different cultures and different regulatory environments? Because every country does things in a different way, I should imagine. There's no sort of set pattern to it. Is that a tricky thing to navigate?
Yeah, we're kind of like we're always very optimistic, and we just go in countries and then we see what works. That's how we like to do things, pretty much. We're just like looking a bit around the legal sort of like implication, and then we're like, all right, let's just try it, and let's just try it out, and yeah, and then we just go, we try, and if it doesn't work, we try something else, pretty much. But we have this sort of like very iterative approach of like doing things is what is really important, trying things and failing as early as we can, sort of like to test. So yeah, there is so much you can test beforehand. The best test you can do is like just actually try to go there do something.
It's interesting you say about failure because I speak to a lot of founders, and failure is an important thing to learn, isn't it? To learn how to cope with failures and what you kind of then do differently.
Yeah.
So, is that been a very important part of your journey that you s- test things out, and if they fail, you do them in a different
Yeah,
way?
yeah, absolutely. And it's also being okay to move on from failure as well. Not being stuck in something like the worst. The worst is, which is oftentimes the case, is when something kind of work but not really, and then you're like, should I double down or not? And sometimes that's the hardest thing because when it's a clear failure, it didn't work at all, then it's easy, all right. But when it's kind of working and then you're not really sure, it's really hard to say, all right, I'm just gonna drop it and move on to something else. Um,
That's the engineer in you, isn't it? I think.
yeah, yeah, exactly. That's where we have some good arguments with my co-founder, I would say.
So let's talk a little bit more about your company. I mean, tell me first of all, how big it is, how many people you have, what's your breakdown in terms of the engineering team versus other bits of the business now?
Sure. So we're about 60 people now. Engineering team, I think we have like around 15 engineers. And then the product team in general, so engineers plus designers plus PM and stuff like that, should be around like 25 people in the company, so a bit less than half. And then the rest is like business development and operation, pretty much.
And how is that managing quite a large team, having gone from just two of you to this big team made up of lots of different people and lots of different personalities? What sort of tips have you picked up along the way about how you cope with managing a team of that size?
I think we recruited well in a sense that people are self-managing themselves. Like people are responsible. Ultimately, you're ultimately responsible for your career, and we are making sure that we're recruiting people that are sort of like taking care of themselves. Um, and yeah, we really value like autonomy, uh, being proactive. But like, what we really want, I'm trying to find a good way to articulate this one. What we really want is the people we recruit. We usually try to get people who are which have
Motivated?
self-motivated, have a high level of autonomy.
Yeah, yeah.
That's kind of like what we're trying to recruit. Yeah.
And yet,
And then that's kind of like goes along the fact that you don't really like, if you recruit those people really well, you don't really like, they don't really need to be actively managed because they take care of themselves. So like,
it's interesting you mentioned management because you also favour sort of mentorship. So is that something that you see is coming from on high, or is that something that you want to see throughout the team so everybody mentors somebody else? I mean, what does mentorship mean to you?
So the idea behind that is more that I don't really like the term management because there is sort of like, I don't know, it always feels that there is some sort of like a hierarchy of things, which I mean, yes, of course there is hierarchy, but mentorship is more like, do you like a manager, you don't choose to be managed by someone, but mentorship is something that you actively choose to be mentored by someone. And I think this resonates a bit more. So sort of like manager get pushed to you. You don't really choose your manager, but you can choose your mentor. So that's why we prefer to use this term mentorship in the company. And it goes along with the way of like, you are ultimately responsible for your own career development. So like, pick a mentor in the company that will help you grow because you know what you need to achieve in order to reach the next step in your career. So like, yeah, pick a mentor that will help you get you there. A manager, if you get assigned a manager that doesn't click with you, you're kind of stuck sometimes. So that's why we prefer to go with the idea of having a mentor instead.
And is that something that you kind of mandate, the mentorship, or is it something that you allow to just happen more organically? I mean, does everybody have to have a mentor, and does everyone have to be a mentor?
No, it's happened a bit more organically, and also depending on which function of the company you are in. So the higher you are, usually the more, let's say, the more guidance you will have. And like, I don't know how can I say this one, but like, the people who are reporting to me directly, I'm not necessarily giving them career advice because they're probably more advanced in the career than I am sometimes. frankly. So it's like who I am to like, I'm not gonna manage them or anything like that. So at this level, it's kind of like, you're kind of like on your own. Like we help each other, but there is no real sort of like mentory or management sort of a scheme. When it's someone who's way more junior in the company, these things are a bit different, I would say. Yeah. So the mentorship is mostly tailored for the engineering team, first of all. And it's really like, so you can see on our company blog, we put all of what we expect engineers to be performing at different levels. So we put the sort of like competence grid. Um, and then you see sort of like you're responsible for your own career, and maybe you realize that you're lacking, you're lacking experience in this point or this other point. And then you see that and then you will ask someone in the company, hey, who's the best or at these things? And then they will be like, you know what, you should sort of like probably pair yourself with this person. They're really strong on this one. You should sort of like try to get better at this. So that's kind of like how it works. And yeah, we're really again trying to like say to people, hey, your career is your the ultimate responsible for your career. So like, choose a mentor, try to level yourself up. We also have education budget as well. Maybe you can use it to like, I don't know, attend a conference or buy a book around X or Y topic that you want to improve yourself on. So that's kind of like how we are doing it pretty much. We give guidelines and we say it works best if you do this. Then it's up to you to decide if you want to meet weekly or every second week. I think those things, I don't like them to be super rigid. And from my own experience, sometimes it's super useful, especially at the beginning. Sometimes it's super useful to meet on a weekly basis, and then eventually, as time goes, usually sometimes the frequency can be reduced, and then things fizzle out, and then you're like, maybe we don't even need it anymore, and then you move on. So it's like, I don't like to have this sort of like, you need to meet every week, because sometimes it feels super counterproductive, and then you're stuck into, not really, and then you're meeting for the sake of meeting, but it's not really doing anything anymore. Yeah, and that's also okay when also the meeting is not being productive anymore. It's mean that maybe, the person stepped up enough that this meeting serves no purpose anymore. So yeah, we're giving guidelines, but then it's up to the person to decide what's best for them.
So, do you really believe in transparency? Because another thing that you've done is publish kind of salary bands and seniority. What was the thinking behind that? Is that just so that everybody knows what's going on and has a sort of input into it, or was it a different philosophy behind guiding that?
So actually, the idea behind the salary ban is that we just wanted to avoid those awkward conversations about salary every time we hired a software engineer, and it's just like super useful where you say, where this is a salary, this is what you're gonna like, this is the company that you're applying for, this is a salary band, um, you know, like take it or leave it kind of things. And also it makes everybody like in the company when we're doing this yearly salary calibration, people understand where they are, it's very clear, and it's just bring a lot of like it makes things less emotional about salary compensation, because it can be quite an emotional topic. So it was really like, we were like, you know what, like if we put all of these things public, it's generally just beneficial for everybody in the company. Is also is great PR for the company outside, but also like outside of the salary topic which we publish on our blog, we have a lot of things that we're doing internally that we want to make public. So for instance, the quarterly update that we send to our investors, we also send it to the rest of the company so that everybody understand what's going on. We also so for instance, little things such as most of our Slack channel are public. They're public by default unless you really specifically need something to be private, meaning if you need to discuss something about, customer data or something that cannot be publicly shared. And most of our meetings are also transcribed, and everybody can check what was the meeting about. So if you want to check the latest, I don't know, meeting about SEO in the company, you can actually, even if that's not something that you're necessarily dealing with every day. But if you have the curiosity, you can check all of these things. And that's kind of like the philosophy that we have in the company.
Is it do you think the reason that it's happened is a sort of a bit of a backlash against sort of big tech companies who are quite proprietary, or is it what what's the background to this?
I think the background is to like why did we start to build in public is like just try to be humble about what you're doing and really just showing like this is who we are. There is actually human who are trying to do these things, and it really came from nothing more than that. And just and I had a few company that are building in public that I respect and like, and I was like, that's cool. Like I would like to do the same thing pretty much, but there was no real sort of like calculation more than that. It was just like, oh, I like what they're doing. I want to do the same thing.
I wonder what investors make of it. Are they happy about that, or
Yeah, they don't have too much, like, again, because we're not, like, I would say maybe if we were like to fully open source or code base and stuff like that, maybe they will be a bit more, wary. But yeah, with what they're doing, with what we're doing, there's, yeah. And I think it's good PR as well. So, like, I guess they're happy about it.
there's been a lot of talk around kind of talent, especially in the engineering world, not enough engineers, and then even retaining that talent if you get them. How have you found that, both in terms of recruiting and retaining?
Yes, definitely challenging. Recruiting, especially, I mean, the recruiting on the engineering front, I think the criteria has changed a little bit. Where when I started my career, it felt like it was really, really you needed to be super, super fit technically all the time, like just and we didn't care so much about the how to say. I don't want to say the human aspect, but sort of like the outside of the engineering, like your social skill, your way, how do you, how do you manage yourself within a project and stuff like that. Whereas right now, for us, like technical skills super important, but we're also looking at product sense. How do you understand? How are you able to emphasize with the user? How do you work within a team? Are you just like purely someone who write code, or are you just someone who also understand the business and why do you write this piece of code? Who's the end user and who are you serving pretty much? So this has changed quite a lot in the engineering industry, and I feel like a lot of companies are starting to shift their focus when it's come to recruitment from just purely technical to also like having engineer that understand the business as well.
Is Berlin a sort of hotbed of tech talent, would you say? We were talking to a guest previously who was saying, that the city seems to attract people that are risk takers, and people that want to sort of be involved in things that perhaps are, more of a startup culture than getting into the corporate world. Is that a sort of trope that you would recognize about Berlin?
I'm not sure. I guess so. I guess so. It's not like it's like every. I would say it's the same as every big major startup city. Like you will find the same thing. I'm sure you'll find the same thing in London, which is the ultimate capital of startup in Europe. Like if you look at the numbers, this is they speak for themselves. It's kind of the same in Paris as well. In Berlin as well, like those cities that attract, that have like a network of investors, infrastructures around startups and stuff like that. They attract people who are risk takers and who wants to build things for sure. I would not say Berlin is unique compared to its European counterpart on this front, though.
And what about sort of work culture? I mean, how have you found that? Is that a really important part of what you do? Making sure that everybody is happy in their roles and that there's general contentment in the company. Uh, that seems to have become a big focus for people, especially since the pandemic. Would you agree that that's come into sort of closer focus in the last few years?
I would say that people are really realizing that, yeah, after the pandemic, people are really realizing that there is just more to work as well. That's something that you need to take in account, while still sort of like you can still have some really like, I mean, your job has to have a purpose now, and it needs to be sort of like intellectually rewarding for people to stick around. So yeah, I think there is way more like people are less attached to their job as before. Like people move a bit more these days. And the really purpose and having something which is intellectually challenging for people seems to be really important these days, for sure.
So every company is now thinking about AI, starting to implement AI. What does that mean to Feather?
That means that we're trying to actively release some proof of concept within the company, which are delivering actual like value. And it's really like, as you say, a lot of companies are doing a lot of things. There is a lot of like company announcing stuff around what they're doing with AI, and we're really taking a step-by-step approach of like trying to understand little by little what those LLMs, those large language models can do, and trying to find, first of all, one niche little problems which we can like solve with those things, and then expanding it and going from there. So we have some team responsible for like experimenting with that, mostly around like automating operation, and it's super useful. It's really interesting to do because we have a super short feedback loop. We're doing it with people within the company, and it's not customer facing yet. And we're just building more and more knowledge around how to build, using this super cool new technology pretty much.
Vincent, I have thrown a lot of questions at you, and I'm going to end by asking you to think of a question that's been on your mind, a burning question, whether it be about your industry, about startup culture, about Berlin.
Okay.
What's the question that keeps you awake at night?
So lately, with all of the development with all of AI and stuff like that, I'm really wondering how the future is going to look like when it's come to our human machine interface. So essentially around the way right now we're using phone with apps, and everything seems to be moving text-based right now because those applications are really getting more and more clever around really reading your intent and understanding what you want to do eventually. And maybe for instance for industry, instead of like having, right now we have a mobile app like every good insurance company has, where you can manage your policy, and maybe this will just go through ChatGPT or Cloud AI or something like that, especially with the new upcoming of those frameworks like MCP from Anthropic. Maybe that will mean that it will maybe be the end of graphical interface as we know them. So I'm kind of like wondering if that could be something. So yeah, that's one of the questions that keep me awake.
That's a good question, and actually this is a theme that's coming up a lot, this human digital interface and how we're going to kind of bring the two together in coming years. Vincent, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
This has been the Techspace Pod, a series by Techspace, the workspace for change makers in tech. Thank you for listening today, and make sure to subscribe for new episodes. Visit techspace.co for full conversations and to find out more about our spaces, members, and upcoming events, from panel talks to gatherings inspired by conversations like this one. See you next time.